Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Colt and Jess videos from last week. Lean Donut says, I'm going to live my whole life in a way that nobody looks at me the way Kirk looks at Colt. Zolema says, Dr. Kirk doesn't like the internet term gaslight, so then what exactly is happening there between Colt and Jess? Okay, so good question. I want to be clear. I like the term gaslight. I just don't like it being used in a haphazard way. People who have experienced actual gaslighting are absolutely being abused and deserve the label of gaslight. Gaslighting is when someone goes on a campaign, usually a long-term campaign over days, weeks, months, years, to screw with someone's head such that they will question their own judgment, with the purpose of trying to gain control over that person. It's usually an insidious process, highly abusive, very premeditated, and it's long-term. And it really does work. When it works on you, it really breaks you down. And a lot of people who have gone through domestic violence perpetration or been victimized by domestic violence or been victimized by intimate partner violence can attest to this. Not everyone who goes through that experience can attest to it, but many can. This idea that the abuser is on this campaign to lie to you, to screw with your head, to make you believe that nothing you think is accurate, that your entire ability to judge what's right and wrong, what's true and lies, your ability to differentiate between those things, you just can't do it because they just break you down. They break you down. Okay, that happens. And so I like the term gaslight being applied to that because that's the definition and that's the clinical usage of the term. On the internet, people are using gaslighting when someone's just lying to someone or when someone doesn't really know what's happening. And actually, listen to my whole episode on gaslighting. I don't know what it's called, but it was a couple months ago. Me and Umberto go through various different examples of gaslighting and discuss the term. Now, I also recognize that the term or language evolves over time. And so 10 years from now, the word gaslighting might be different. And in our culture, we just have a different term. But for now, I prefer to use the term gaslighting for the way I've always used it, which is the way I defined it, not just for general lying. So when Colt and Debbie lie and deceive and Jess notices that they are lying and deceiving, that's not gaslighting because one, they're just lying. They're not going on a campaign to try to drive Jess to not believe she doesn't understand what's happening. Two, it is, if they are doing that, it's extremely ineffective. People who gaslight, they typically know what they're doing and it usually is effective. We're using the term gaslighting when it's being effective. If Colt and Debbie lie, we can just call it that. They're lying. They are deceiving. They are immature, they don't understand, or they're distorted, or something's going on. That happens, and you can accuse people of that. If someone's lying, if someone's being deceptive, if someone's being immature, if someone's being harmful, we can absolutely blast someone for that. That person is lying. That person is being immoral. That person is harming other people. That person is selfish. You can say that. But to say gaslighting, then you have to demonstrate the person is trying and using typical techniques to actually break down the ability of another person to actually determine right from wrong, lies from truth. And I don't think any of us watching the Colt and Debbie Jess triangle think that Colt and Debbie are doing that, let alone it's not working. It's not even coming close to working because at every turn, Jess is like, you're lying, you're lying, you're lying. So again, lying and noticing a lie, that's not gaslighting, right? Now, you can attempt to gaslight. So anyway, listen to the whole episode that I did on gaslighting. Again, people are free to use language how they want to. Language changes, and I'm okay with that. But so I want to be clear. I don't dislike the term gaslighting. I just want to reserve it for those. It's sort of like when people suffer from OCD, from obsessive compulsive disorder. It is a severe disorder. OCD is extremely debilitating. If you talk to people who actually suffer from it, as I have, you know that it is an extremely, it's a very difficult condition to live with. But you have people on the internet saying, oh my God, I'm so OCD. I like my closet to be color coordinated. Oh my God, I'm so OCD. You're not OCD. that's not, you're demeaning the experience of other people. And when we use gaslighting in this flippant way, in my opinion, I think we're demeaning the experience of people who actually go through it. They deserve to have that word for them. We can use other words like deceiving or lying or harming. Those are strong words. And I feel like in today's internet world, to accuse someone of lying doesn't have the weight that it used to. But we should return to believing that lying and deceiving others is wrong. And we need to really live in that world, that to accuse someone of lying is a severe accusation. And people should be concerned about those kinds of labels being put on them, but we water down these terms, or we water down the morality or something, and so we look for other words that have more oomph to them. And I think that's what we're doing with gaslighting, which is fine. Again, who am I? I'm just one person among 4.5 billion. And is it 4.5 billion? Is it 7.5? How many billions do we have? It's like, I think it's 7.5. Anyway, Baby Trisha says, what Colt did was randomly message various... Okay, so Baby Trisha is telling me what Colt did on the texting to other women. What Colt did was randomly... And I was, because Jess was accusing Colt of sending private part pics, triple Ps, to randos. And I was like, were they dating? Were they consensual triple Ps? I don't know. Baby Trisha says, what Colt did, in fact, was randomly message various women. He started off with, hi, good morning, I love you. Then immediately after sent them a pic of his private area, women he didn't even know. That's just weird. Well, if that's true, yes, that is weird. And sexual assault, to be honest. Oishi-sen says, I wonder if the reason Jess, chose to confront him in public was partially for safety, and the reason he wanted to be at home so he could browbeat her emotionally. I think that's quite possible. All right, Elizabeth and Andre video. There were a few of them from last week. Julia says, Elizabeth needs a therapist to vent to so she doesn't keep creating drama between her family. Maybe she likes being in the middle, though. It gives her a role of peacemaker that might make her feel good when she's successful in peacemaking. I think she says later on that she's been the peacemaker between her mom and dad a lot. I did not know that, Julia. So Libby says that she was the peacemaker between her mom and dad a lot. That would really explain a lot. And I'm glad you told me that, Julia. I didn't know that. By the way, if you ever want to give me details like that, it can help. Sometimes I miss things, or sometimes people pick up details in interviews that I don't watch because I just watch the show. So that's good information to know. And that would certainly explain a lot. I mean, literally getting chills because, when I think about Elizabeth and I think about the way she acts, there's always these questions. But it would make total sense, right? You're a kid and you're the peacemaker. Maybe you're the favorite. There's some elements of that. It kind of looks like the other siblings see Libby as the favorite, particularly to the dad. And if the dad went to, and of course Elizabeth works side by side, I think in the same office with the dad. So I think the dad and Libby have a very close relationship, maybe throughout their entire life. And the dad would go to, again, I'm just speculating, but the dad would go to Libby, and Libby would be the peacemaker between mom and dad while they were having troubles. I'm pretty sure they divorced, right, at a certain point. And so she gets love and attention. So you're 5, 7, 10 years old, and you learn that in order to feel useful, in order to feel loved, in order for family tension to go down, you have to be involved. And you might learn this heuristic, this shortcut, that if people are fighting and then you step in to help them, then everything is better. Without realizing that if you provoke the fighting, you're actually creating the problem, but it's an unconscious process. So we can imagine someone growing up in that situation later in life, when things are calm, they don't know what to do. And so they like to create conflict between people so that they can step in and try to mediate. But of course, if you create monsters in conflict that run out of control, then you can only do so much. So I think that is a very interesting detail, Julia. Thanks for telling me that. Suzanne says, if there is if there are poverty traumas in this family, I guess the person with the most money would have a lot of emotional power over the others, even without doing anything to have that power. If they all have poverty traumas or have inherited the distorted view of that world, maybe they have underlying anxiety that won't let them leave the dependent relationship with the person with the money. Right. So I don't know if I've been talking about that, but that is an hypothesis that I have been having, which is that this family comes from a history of poverty and has been traumatized by that. Maybe one generation back, maybe even just 20 years ago for the family. And when you come from that place, then you might exhibit some of the behaviors that this family exhibits. One is this signaling that they frequently will put out into the world that they're rich and that they're fine. You know, if they were humiliated or their parents were humiliated or their grandparents were humiliated because of lack of money and being low class, then you were the rules of this family system are such that you're in this constant anxiety, running away from poverty, running away from being low class, and you're constantly signaling to everyone, I have money, I'm not low class. And when an outsider comes in, you would be very scared that they're going to drag you down or they're going to take away your livelihood because you know what it's like to be poor. And that's something that often isn't talked about in our society, the severe trauma that poverty can bring about, the food insecurity, the health care insecurity, the security insecurity, meaning that in some poor neighborhoods, the police don't respond as quickly, or they don't respond as nicely or something, or other kinds of factors that play into one's security. And that's just the United States. Imagine being in other societies where there are even greater disparities and even lower levels of poverty, if you will. So it's something that we need to, and I need to remember to add to the list of hypotheses for this family. Crunchy Tofu says, I feel like Elizabeth is the main one causing most of the issues. She goes to her father, asks for things, and then at the same time shares information about Andre that will make her father dislike him more, then go back to her husband and complain about her father to him, causing more tension and animosity between the two of them. Yes. Agreed, Crunchy Tofu. JD, good old JD says, the irony of him having a handyman job in exchange for free housing, but didn't do it, and then wants to post an ad for handyman jobs. All right. Kaya says, wow, I didn't notice this the first time. I now notice that Libby definitely adds fuel to the fire. Yeah, it certainly seems that way. It's hard to know, but from what they show us on the show, it definitely looks like she is creating the conflict, at least to some extent, if not mostly. Tay says, when I got into my first serious relationship, my mom told me, if I'm ever going to vent about my partner, do it with someone who is never going to meet him. And find someone else to vent for about, your family as well. It's probably some of the best advice she's ever given me. That is really great advice for the reasons that I talk about. Marina says, Andre taking away her phone in this manner is scary and close to abusive behavior. I wonder what else he does that we haven't seen. If he's not afraid to behave like this on camera, I'd be scared to be around him when the camera is off. Agreed, Marina. And yeah, I absolutely agree. That behavior is abusive. To just grab someone's phone out of their hand because you just don't want them texting someone is not okay. And exhibits a mindset that he might have, seems to have, of entitlement, of sexism, perhaps misogyny, and and lack of emotional awareness. These are all factors that contribute to progressive abusive behavior. Now, they've been together for a while, and we haven't necessarily, or at least on the show, been given strong evidence that he is perpetrating control and intimidation upon her. But, we don't know. Certainly, there's an element of that. Tammy says, I just gave birth last week. Husband, mom, mother-in-law, everyone, whatever you want, say, so all the family, I just gave birth last week and all my family said, whatever you want is just fine. Just let us know. Bless them all. Right. So Tammy's saying, look, in my family, when it came to who was going to be in the birthing room and who was not, they all just said, what do you need? Let us know. Instead of imposing things or getting all bent out of shape if it's not to your liking. Alyssa says, I was a doula and a childbirth educator, and one of the things I would have to talk to couples about was who would be in the room. It's a much bigger deal than a lot of people think it is. Humans have a hard time giving birth when they feel stressed or unsafe, so having someone in there that you don't want can actually make the birth itself harder. Right. Yeah, the whole thing that I was reacting to in that storyline with Elizabeth and Andre was that Elizabeth and Andre needed to sit down well prior, maybe months prior to the birth, and discuss, okay, what do we want? And we're going to have different ones. But let's talk about it. Let's listen to each other. Let's think about the factors, and let's come to an agreement. And then we, as a couple, will go to our family and say, here's what we've decided. But we didn't see that, and we saw the result of that lack of foresight. Now, usually people will not have that sort of foresight or will avoid those kinds of conversations because they don't trust that the other person is going to listen, or they trust that the conversation is going to go badly, and so they avoid, and then at the last minute they assert themselves, and then bad things happen. All right, Kalani and Asuelu videos. By the way, I know I'm occasionally mispronouncing Kalani as Kaylani. I don't know how I got that in my head, but there you go. Flower Polyester says, Dr. Honda, you have absolutely been a mentor. Oh, Dr. Honda, you have absolutely been a mentor to me. My boyfriend and I were in conflict, but we resolved our issues, and I owe my ability to communicate effectively to you. I sometimes just straight up watched a video by you and then felt inspired to share a similar feeling with my friend and texted him almost word for word what you said, and it helped. You gave me a template for how to apologize, be assertive, and helped correct the ideas that I had in my head. I never had a good example growing up. You gave me my first real healthy example. Thank you. Well, Flower Polyester, that is just one of the best comments I've ever read in my life. I'm so happy. I've studied this sort of thing a long time, and I want other people to know this stuff because it certainly does help me. It helps the people that I work with, and I'm glad that it's helping you. Okay, so Norberta says, so I was saying willpower doesn't exist. So willpower doesn't exist. My mind is blown. Do you have a deep dive or other resources to expand on this idea? I thought the reason that I'm unsuccessful in life is because I'm lazy and lack willpower. The idea that there's no other way, that there is another way, the idea that there's another way is both exciting and scary. Right. So we have this thing in our culture that says if you're not successful, if you're not meeting your goals, if you're not, realizing your New Year's resolutions, then it's because you lack willpower. It's essentially blaming the victim. And this notion that if I just had the willpower, well, think about all the things that you've ever tried to accomplish. How many of those things did you really want to achieve but didn't achieve? Well, it's not probably because of willpower. It was probably because of something else. So when people are trying to get stuff done, when they have a goal, like they're trying to get more fit, or they're trying to save money, or they're trying to clean their house more consistently, or they're, whatever the New Year's resolution kind of thing is, and then they realize, I'm not really doing the behaviors to get there. Well, there are a lot of possibilities. Willpower is one of 1,000 possibilities, and even then it's questionable. So the things to look into if you are having trouble reaching your goals are, do you actually want the goal? Do you even know what you want? Do you feel like you're being pressured to that goal? Is it a realistic goal? Are you only having the goal because you feel like you need to impress other people? Or is it really a goal from within? Do you have the self-esteem to withstand things that happen? Are you shamed too much? Some people, when, they'll do well with the goal for 9 days, and then one day they don't do well. And then because they were abused or neglected growing up, they fall into a pit of shame, and they're like, what's the point? So there are a lot of reasons why we don't reach our goals: trauma-related, need-related, getting in touch with ourselves-related, realistic-related, imposing from outside-related. And willpower is not a part of that. So, this is a very, and I don't have a deep dive on it, I believe, but you might, I've done over 1,000 episodes. So at a certain point during this podcast, so I've been podcasting for 13 years. If you would have asked me, did you do a podcast on, X subject, I would have been able to answer that question. At some point in the 13 years, past 1,000 episodes, I no longer have the ability to recall every episode that we made, which I think is understandable. But anyway, go to our website, look under the list, maybe Google. Actually, I'll just do it right now. So I'm going to the website for people. So if you don't know, I have an audio podcast I've been doing for 13 years. So I'm going to the website. I'm going to the episode list of episodes page. I'm doing a search, Control F, by procrastination. And I do not have an episode on procrastination, which I think my wife keeps telling me. Maybe I should add it to the list. I will. I'm going to do an episode on procrastination because I get this question a lot. Anyway, good old Yo-Yo-Yo says, I am Asian, so I understand the sharing of money to some degree with your family. Some parents even boast how much money they get from their children. It's like a sign of success. And having a rich child that gives you a lot of money is something that they're proud of. But Asuelu's parents are really rude about it. They probably think Asuelu is super rich because he is in America now. That's how people think about Americans in other countries sometimes. Interesting. She called Irena, it says, I come from a similar sharing culture. I did send money to my dad whilst working abroad, but once I started my own family, he understood that is what comes first. Right. That was my suspicion, is that in Samoan culture, it is very common to send money back to your family, as with many other cultures in that region of the world. But the way that the family is going about it is over the top for some traumatic reason or some narrative reason that we just don't know of. Maybe the mom feels extremely sad and neglected, and she's using money as this proxy for, do you love, when people give her money, it's security that you're loyal. I talk about all that in the video. Stephanie says, parents in my culture can ask you for money, and I'll never see that as a bad thing. Actually, in my culture, it's one of our goals to work to earn money, then give back to our parents. Right. So I'm glad people are talking about this. For some Americans, not all, it might be hard to relate to the mom and Tammy asking money from Asuelu. Under any circumstances, there are some American mainstream families where you would never, ever do that. It is like one of the most impolite things you could ever do for family members to just be like, hey, do you, and they're not saying, hey, I need to buy a car. Can you help me out? They're just saying, give me a monthly allowance, essentially. And for some cultures, that's completely normal. And what I've been saying from the beginning is there's pros and cons to that. I think one of the pros to having that kind of approach is that when you're a collective family and you work together and you share things, then more people are going to prosper. One person is struggling, other people pick that person up. And then if one person does really well, then they share the wealth literally with the other people, which, I think is a great way to live life, especially if other people need it, right? But, it's just cultural differences, and that's fine. A.M. Verdon says, my family has always sent money, clothes, and other miscellaneous things like toys and kitchen tools to Guatemala. It is expected, but not anything above your means, although the demanding of a specific amount, like on the show, is a bit concerning. Yeah. All right, Angela and Michael video from last week. Emily says, I think Angela attacks other women. It's because she is insecure. It's a way for Angela to feel better than other women so she can avoid being compared to them. Interesting. Cece says, I believe Angela has said that her ex-husband or father of her children did not treat Angela with respect. He lied and cheated on her for years. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I like those kinds of details that you get, again, from other sources. It helps me out. Anika says, seems like Angela reverts back to her days on the Maury show when she's in a studio setting. Was she on the Maury show? Interesting. Why was she on the Maury show? All All right, Brandon and Julia video from last week. Katarine says, as someone who has gone through this residency process in 2 countries, I can testify to the stress Julia is feeling. Having your fate in the hands of an anonymous and faceless stranger is not pleasant. Facing the bureaucracy in any foreign country is humbling. Agreed, Katarine. Thanks for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. It does seem like it would be really hard. Better Days says, Brandon seems to not want to be bothered by the situation at all. I really had high hopes for this couple. Agreed, Better Days. I didn't see it that way, but when you put it in those words, it makes sense that, he generally has this lackadaisical attitude towards the wedding. And now you could argue that during the residency process, he is just approaching it with a level head. He maybe feels he needs to keep a level head for her. I think that might be part of it, is that, the mom, his mom, Brandon's mom, is pretty volatile emotionally. And maybe he learned that he had, both of his parents seem pretty volatile emotionally. And maybe Brandon learned that in order for things to balance out, he needs to be very, very level-headed and not express his emotions very much. Otherwise, if he goes with it, then the whole system falls over. And so with Julia, Julia can be a little volatile. And maybe when he sees that, he becomes more and more like a robot. I've seen that happen in couples before. And both people can be hurt by the other. The robot person is like, why do you have to freak out so much, and why do you blame me? And then the emotional, volatile person is like, why are you always like a robot? But they're triggering each other in that process. I don't know. Nicole says, Nicole says, I'm glad Dr. Kirk commented on Brandon's eye roll when Julia just wanted to sit and wait. Watching this bothered me. Maybe he doesn't care, but she does, and it's not, and it's just, and it, sorry. Well, I'll start. So, I'm not the best reader of words, so I hope y'all have patience with me. Okay, Nicole says, I'm glad Dr. Kirk commented on Brandon's eye roll when she wanted to sit and wait. Watching this bothered me. Maybe he doesn't care, but she does, and it's such a simple thing. It makes me appreciate how my partner will listen to me and talk to me about astrology, even though it's not really his thing. He knows it can bring me comfort, and that's all he's really concerned with. Nicole, that's great. I love that story, that you're really into astrology, your partner isn't, and your partner, talks with you, not because he's into astrology, but because he loves you and is concerned with your enthusiasm, which is great. And why wouldn't Brandon? Yeah. When I saw that, I just thought, well, first I thought the whole, we sit and wait before we go is a wonderful practice. And I need to remember to actually incorporate that in my own life. 1, 2, it's, what is it? 15 seconds of sitting and waiting. And if my partner did that and I wasn't into it, I wouldn't have that face. It just seems like there's some level of contempt, or I don't know what's going on in Brandon. Brandon's a hard one to figure out. I have hypothesized about what's going on with him, but his behaviors don't make a ton of sense to me. Because on one hand, it seems like he really loves Julia. On the other hand, it seems like he doesn't care about her at all. I think he does care, but he comes across like he just doesn't care about her at all. So it's a bit of a conundrum, and maybe through the season we'll get some ideas as to what's going on. Maria says, I thought sit and go was just a weird thing my mom did. I didn't realize it was a Russian thing. So fun. It's always nice learning more about one's heritage. My American dad acts like Brandon. He thinks that the sit and go thing is stupid. Interesting. All right, Big Ed. I started, doing the Big Ed dating show. We'll see if I have time to continue with that. Slicktop says, the rat was mid-stroke after witnessing the horror unfolding before its very eyes. Bao says, just to touch on what Dr. Honda mentions in the beginning, I agree a lot of men were raised to have an overabundance of confidence, which can come out in dating and at work. Even if they're not qualified, they tend to think that they are. Right. So interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And I don't think I thought of that at the time, but that is a factor possibly, is that I was talking about how people on dating apps, men will sometimes think that they qualify for a certain range of humans that they don't qualify for. I don't know how to word that, but so for example, you'll have like a 65-year-old guy who says, I only want to date people in their 30s or something. And although it's fine if that's what you're going to look for, but why would you think that that is your best bet? And why wouldn't you just date someone your own age? What's going on there? And I think there are a number of factors. One is that boys are raised to believe that they can do anything and to assume that they can do anything, to feel like they're entitled to anything is another angle to that. So I think there's a lot of factors in there, but yeah, you bring up one of them. Alicia says, I'm 22 and my mom washed my mouth out with soap probably twice when I was young. However, I convinced her that I liked the taste of soap and then she stopped doing it. Well, that's a trick. Did you tell your mom? I'm curious. What'd your mom say? All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.